That's good.
Record on this computer. Yep. Here we go.
And now we're recording. So everyone, welcome to our Kali Linux tour. If you are one of our ACM members and you want free internet points, the checking code is Coliseum. That was a really good pun. You all should laugh at that. So let's talk about Kali Linux though. Now, when you think of Kali Linux, I'm sure you hear of something like this, which is to hack into the mainframe. By the way, I did find out there are real mainframes, by the way. So it's not like this is a fake thing. Mainframes are real, but Kali Linux is one of the best tools to actually do this with. And the reason is because Kali Linux is very powerful in the offensive security world. But you might be asking, what is offensive security?
Yeah, and we have a poll for this just to gauge where you guys are. Yeah, let's launch that.
So what do you think offensive security is? You hear that? What's the first instinct from this poll?
Oh shoot, okay, one of the poll answers doesn't look complete.
That's okay.
Darn. Oh, that was gonna be the best one. That was the that was the play on words. The second option was a profession which you protect people by insulting others. Get it? Like offensive security.
So by these results, go ahead.
And for some reason that was cut out. So
it's just like the real cybersecurity world. Things are often cut. So a lot of you selected that it is basically everybody offending each other by being insulting. That's a very accurate term for offensive security. But in reality,
let me release the results.
But in reality, what offensive security is think about this. You probably are more used to hearing about defenders. You hear about people who are actually stopping attacks from happening while they are happening. Almost like I would call it reactionary security in a sense. It's defensive security, but we'll call it reactionary because when an attack happens, they usually attempt to stop the attack and keep it from escalating or going further, stealing more data. We can go through the list, and that's the point. And the offensive security sort of does the opposite. Instead of waiting for an attack to happen, offensive security actually goes out and they try to find attacks before they happen. This could be through several methods. You could do penetration testing, where you hire a firm or individual who literally tries to hack your devices, usually within a certain scope. Do you have people who actually go out into the wild, find viruses or other things that they haven't seen before, and then report back and say, okay, this is something that could potentially be an issue? You have people that go through operating systems like Windows and scour to see if there's any defenses that or things that are out of place or third-party programs that can potentially be exploited.
You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. So that's sort of the overview of what is offensive security. Ishan, I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to add on to that.
No, I think you covered it, but yeah, that's about it.
So that's sort of the overview of what is offensive security. Now, the reason we're looking into Kali Linux is Kali Linux is sort of the prime tool for that. And these are some real world, actually, before we even go to that, these are some real world offensive security firms. We've got Google Project Zero, which is actually a subpart of Google, who their literal job is to go out into the wild and find exploits. In fact, one of the exploits that they're responsible for finding, they actually will find exploits in iMessage, for example, on Apple's iPhones, which is an end-to-end encrypted product, but often because of the way it's designed can actually be exploited. And one of their most recent papers was actually about how Apple worked to protect iMessage from exploits using text messaging and symbols that it couldn't recognize. We also have Rapid7, which is another offensive security firm. They are more of a pen testing type firm. They go in and they actually try out different attacks to see what might work on an organization. They'll even go as far as to try to test the employees. They will even go as far as to employ phishing tactics, for example. Seeing if the security culture at the office is good. We've got Black Hills Information, which is very similar to Rapid7. They do the same type of thing, penetration testing on other companies, and they're really going in there to see what they can find that might cause issues for a company. And of course, you have the NSA. And you might be saying, Well, the NSA, what do you mean the NSA? Well, the NSA, sort of their purpose is data collection. And a lot of times, the only way to collect data is to exploit certain damages, certain, well, lack of a better term, exploits in the environment that they can use. For example, maybe to capture certain files on transit or to capture things from cameras. I mean, I think you've all heard the joke, the NSA is always watching. They have a lot of these exploits, but there are times the NSA will actually report security issues. They'll report exploits because they feel that it's more damaging to not patch it than it is for them to have access to something. And most of the time they find another way around anyway. So these are just some real world examples. And we kind of have the links here that you can kind of go through. We'll send the slides out after too. But if you wanted to see any of these companies, you could read through how they do what they do. You can read through some of their blogs, even if they have them, of how they penetrate certain systems. So how many of you know what Kali Linux is? Just a...
We have a poll for this one too. Is that your ringtone?
We just want to get a gauge of what, you know, where all of you are.
Interesting. Okay, so 9 out of 9 people voted. Let's end that and share results. Looks like 2 people use Arch, by the way, and they want you to know that.
The Arch Linux users. So that's actually a good amount of you. I wasn't expecting as many of you to know what Kali Linux is, but it's awesome that you know. So why do we choose Kali Linux for security? Well, their quote is literally, the quieter you become, the more you are able to hear. And the reason they say that quote is because when you think about offensive security, a lot of the time, or even a hacker, let's think about a hacker for a second. How does a hacker want to attack a system? Do they really want to be as loud as possible? They want to go in, let's call it guns a-blazing, and, you know, destroy the entire office, you know, security structure. I got a yes in the chat. Generally, they don't want to do that. Generally, they want to connect in, they want to be able to steal stuff, and they don't want to be found, because the minute they're found, somebody can then go and track everything down. And the reason we choose Kali Linux is because it comes preloaded with a ton of offensive tools. And I'm talking, we have a slide that is literally just a small list. If you go to the actual website, we'll have a link at the end. There are hundreds of tools that you can work with to get your access. As well as that, the kernel is built around wireless injections. What you may not know is wireless is sort of a security issue in itself, but it's not like every system that you have is built to actually, you know, exploit a wireless interface and then take the data from there. But Kali Linux is specifically built to do that. So it makes it really easy to go in and actually inject something into a wireless signal to then exploit a potential vulnerability. And it's also built with a specific scope in mind. So unlike a lot of other Linux distributions, let's take Ubuntu, for example, or even Mint for the matter, they're both, or Arch, we can even take Arch. Those are all sort of, I would call them general use Linux distros. They are not really built with a specific purpose in mind. In fact, a lot of them are built to be like Windows, sort of open. You can do virtually anything you want on them. You could use it as a daily operating system. And Kali Linux is a little different in that it's built from the ground up with security in mind. It's based on open source too, like Debian, which means it's even, unlike something like Windows or macOS, which is proprietary, people go through this code and they make it more secure. It also has cool dragon wallpapers, because who doesn't like dragons? And if you don't like dragons, we're gonna need to have a chat. But the last point, and I'm gonna pound this into your heads, it is security, security, security. It doesn't have anything more. It has nothing less. It is just for security's sake. There's a lot of things that the Kali Linux people, they actually will disable it, because even though it might be used for, like, let's say your printer, for example, why would Kali Linux need access to a printer? I mean, that one's a little bit extreme. I think they do allow printers, but let's just say that's a good as an example. They disable a lot of that because, quite frankly, it is something that somebody could potentially use to exploit you. And if you're penetration testing, the last thing you want is to have the tables turned on you, and all of a sudden you're the one being penetrated and exploited. So with that in mind, how are we going to use Kali Linux? Well, we're going to use it on a virtual machine because, as we said, it's really not built for anything that isn't security based. You should not be using Kali Linux as your daily operating system. We actually had a friend that we were just in a Discord chat with who said his first Linux distro was a Kali Linux distro. I would recommend never doing that. Like, Kali Linux is great if you know what you're doing, but if you have no idea what you're doing, it can get very, very difficult, and you will be frustrated, and you will just hate Linux. And I don't want you to hate Linux because Linux is great. It's also not for gaming. This is true. Do not use Kali Linux for gaming. Steam does have Proton, but you're not using Kali Linux. They probably disabled most of the features you would need anyways. So we're going to be using a virtual machine. Now, what is a virtual machine? A virtual machine is essentially, it's an environment with its own CPU, memory, network interface, and storage. And it is sandboxed from your entire operating system, meaning it actually operates in its own sandbox. It's not a part of, it can't touch anything in Windows, for example, if you're running Windows, or Mac OS for that matter. It can't touch either of those. And it sort of just operates in its own environment. It literally just its own environment. And a good example, and we're going to be using, in this case, Virtualbox is the one we're going to be using. And it uses essentially a hypervisor that runs virtual machines on certain hardware. So, and you can see we actually have a really cool image down here. Sean found this. It's an awesome image where you have the virtual machine running on top of a hypervisor, running on top of the actual hardware. So that means that theoretically, even if your Kali Linux system in your VM was to be compromised, nothing under that hypervisor is going to be damaged, which is really important for our sake here, especially if you're doing penetration testing. You don't know what's out there. So this is a quick demo of how to actually install Virtualbox or Kali Linux on Virtualbox. And I kind of have the steps here, and I can also do a quick overview on the desktop just to show you guys how this would be done. So we'll go ahead, and I'm going to exit out of that and stop sharing for a second here. And then I'm going to show you the standard from scratch way to do it, because now for our sake, we are going to be using an offensive security pre-built one. But just so you understand how to set it up yourself, if you wanted to do from scratch and really kind of get everything rolling that way, I think this would be the best way to approach this. So I'm just going to share my screen, and hopefully nothing horrible pops up. So what you're going to do is, first things first, you need to download the actual distro. And in this case, let me scroll through all my files here, because of course, and in this case, it's going to be a .eso file. As soon as I find that. Here it is. We'll just drag it to desktop to make it easier to find later. It's .eso. Now these ESO files are just kind of think of CD installing Windows. That's basically what this is. So what you're going to want to do is you have your VirtualBox. You're going to have to install VirtualBox. If you Google it, it's a quick download away. I also included a link in our Google Drive folder I sent earlier. So all you have to do is click New. And then it's going to ask you, okay, what kind do you want to create? And then we're going to call ours, just for sake, Kali Linux demo. And then we're going to say, it knows it's Linux now, but we can actually specify that is a Debian version. As we said earlier, Kali Linux is based on Debian, and we're going to do 64-bit. So, and then you can choose where to store it. I'm just going to store it in my C drive, totally fine. I will toss it, let's call it 4 gigs. I think that's a decent amount. And then you're going to create a virtual hard drive. This is going to be this is our virtual hard drive that's not going to be connected to our actual hard drive, but it will still take up space. I do have a question in the chat. What kind of desktop is that? That is the SCP desktop. It's an amazing desktop. I love this thing. I've kept it forever. And then from here, you can pretty much just kind of go through this, dynamically allocated. Now, Kali Linux likes storage. So I would say you need at least 20 to get started. You can definitely do more. In fact, Offensive Security recommends 80, because if you're doing forensics on files and things, you're going to need a lot of storage to store that stuff. But we're just going to do 20 for our case, just so it doesn't completely overwrite my drive. And then from there, we're going to run it, hopefully. Or we won't, because Kali Linux is not going to run for me, which is also a possibility. Yes, virtual drives do require, so I set this to 20 gigs. It will take up a straight 20 gigs, and you will notice that very quickly. Especially if you set something like 2 terabytes, you're going to notice your entire drive will be gone. This guy is refusing to start up, so that's a world. But we'll just run our demo one here that actually I know for a fact works, maybe in another world. And you'll see something similar to this. Except not broken. Oh, you know what? This is why. Because I already have. Oh, there we go. Startup disk. Okay, perfect. Well, there's our other virtual machine. I forgot to set up startup disk. So you're going to add your startup disk. This is where our little guy over here comes into play. You just close. Yes, go away. Go away. We're going to go into desktop where I've stored my guy here. And we're just going to throw that guy in there. I'm going to choose him. And then it will start the whole process. Now, when you set this up, it's not going to have anything pre-set up. There's going to be pretty much nothing. You are setting it from scratch. And you can see here, it's really small, but that's the BIOS menu. We're going to do a graphical install because unless you are very tech savvy and you know where you're going in the bash, I would recommend installing the GUI so that you know, oh, and there we go, it failed. You're going to see this occasionally too, where it's just not going to work the first time, and then you're just going to need to rerun it, and then it does work. Like, this is just, VirtualBox is one of those things, it takes some playing around with, and then the 7th time you try it, for some reason, it'll just work. So just be aware of that. In fact, I think we're actually, oh, I see a little dot over there. Yeah. So this is running the installation right now, but once you get in, basically from there, you just sort of have to set up a username, you set up a password, so forth, so on. Just like a normal Windows install, almost, actually. So we'll go ahead and go back to sharing the slides here. Does anyone have any questions so far? I know we've kind of sped through a lot of stuff so far. Just some of the basics to get you started in Kali. Yeah. And then Chris is saying here that Kali takes up 8+ gigs. Yeah. Kali is one of the bigger distros, honestly, from start, mostly because of the amount of tools it comes preloaded with. That we're going to go over a bit later in the workshop. So let's go ahead to reshare this guy. Back to presenting. Okay. And hopefully Google Slides. Yay. Okay, great. So once you do all that, profit off IoT, because IoT, if you didn't know, is very insecure. So, well, not all IoT. I'll specify. IoT that isn't updated is really insecure. So, and once we get into Kali Linux, we get this cool looking dragon, and this is what it looks like. So, and I think
there for this too.
Mm-hmm.
Let's launch that.
So, why doesn't it look more hackery? Ooh.
Okay, let's see. Things are still coming.
Needs dark mode. If you didn't know, I'm more of a light mode person. So anybody who likes dark mode, you're in the wrong place. Okay, we'll give the poll another 5 seconds here, I think.
Yeah, 9 out of 10 people voted. I don't know, looks like the last person. Blue mode supremacy, yeah. Okay, looks like the last person's not going to vote, so there we are. Most of you said, why doesn't it look more hackery?
This is a fair point. Yeah, this is just how it looks. Why are you calling out Kali Linux?
One person said Windows user for life. Nobody likes blue.
So we'll go ahead at this point. I'm going to stop sharing again. And all right, so let me ask, how many people here are actually following along with our demo here? How many people are installing Kali Linux and running some of our demos? You can just put like a check mark or raise hand. Oh yeah, just use raise hand actually. If you're not, that's totally fine. But just so we have a better idea of how we want to do our demos here. Okay. Oh.
Someone raised hand.
All right. So we have Melissa, we have Nicholas. Okay, awesome. So we'll go ahead. What I'm going to do is we're going to run through our demos first then actually, before we go into all the tools. Just so
did you guys manage to get your VM up and running?
All right.
So Nicholas got one says thumbs up.
Okay.
Melissa, what about you? Is that a...
Did you have a question, Melissa? Or oh, what do I do at the disk part? So I think you're at the part where you're actually installing from the ISO. So the way we actually did it, we actually had a pre-done Linux distro.
Should I pause the recording now? I can.
Yeah, we can pause real quick and answer.
Okay, recording is resuming.
All right, awesome, and we are back. So here is Kali Linux, the actually running in VM. For everyone that's watching the recorded version. For everyone that's here, you've already seen all of this. So we're going to run through a few quick demos. Don't worry, after we will show you how we actually did all of it. We're not just going to type a bunch of random stuff out and then you just have to hope that you know what's going on. So first thing, just a simple one. We have Wireshark in here. Now, for those who don't know what Wireshark is, Wireshark's whole purpose is to basically capture packets from networks and be able to read and understand them. If they're, now I will specify, it has to be unencrypted. If it's encrypted, you will still capture the packet, but you will not be able to read it without the proper key. So in this case, what we're going to do, just a simple one, we're just going to double click this guy. And because Kali Linux has Wireshark built in, it will just automatically open it, or I thought it would. It does not. Never mind. Ignore me. So we're going to go ahead and we're just going to open up our Wireshark. Let me see.
Let's try searching for Wireshark in there.
There we go. Yeah. There's Wireshark. And I have to type in my sudo password so that it knows that it's fine. And eventually it will open. There we go. And since it's on a VM, just don't spam anything. Just be aware it will take longer than usual to open than if you're running direct on your computer. That's just the nature of how these virtual machines work. And what we're going to do is we're going to click File on the top here. We're going to click Open, and then we will find our file. Now, I am going to specify that it is organized different from Windows. Instead of looking for the desktop straight from this menu, you actually have to go into Home, and then Kali, and then you're going to go to Desktop. And our guy is right there. We're going to go to DNS. And there you go. This is our first tool we're sort of demoing here. Let me get a little bigger. So from here, you can kind of see we've got a bunch of packets. These are actually, this was actually from a CTF we did recently. They asked a bunch of questions like, how do you find this? How do you find that in these files? And what these are here, you can actually see these are different packets. We've got TCP packets, we've got DNS packets, all just information that it's grabbed from probably honestly, just a Wi-Fi connection. And you can do this over any unencrypted connection pretty much. And Wireshark can actually do this on the fly as well. So if you wanted to, you could install Wireshark on your computer in Kali or on Windows. There actually is a Windows version, and you can sit your computer down and say, okay, I want to go to Starbucks and I'm just going to capture Wi-Fi traffic. We're not encouraging you to do anything malicious with it. Don't do anything bad with it, but it is kind of neat to kind of see how much data you can collect by just sitting down at a Starbucks. You can do that all with Wireshark. And a lot of pen testing firms, they'll use this to kind of just get some preliminary reconnaissance data and figure out, okay, what am I able to capture? What am I able to see? Is there anything that's unencrypted that should be encrypted and I can now exploit that? Like, there's a lot of things you can do with Wireshark. And you can actually see we can start digging into specific internet protocols and all that sort of thing. We won't be doing that. It's a little bit out of scope for this workshop, but just to demonstrate that you can use Wireshark here. And the next one we're going to be demonstrating is we're going to go ahead and I'll do Aircrack next. Why not? So Aircrack is sort of like Wireshark, except instead of, I'll put it like this, instead of being nice and just, capturing packets and not being able to read them if they're encrypted, Aircrack's entire purpose is to actually break packets. So we're going to go ahead and I'm just going to copy paste. And by the way, copy paste will be your friend here. I'm just going to be straight with you. Like everything should be okay. Well, let's go ahead and so to call Aircrack in, what we do is we just have to type Aircrack. I think it's G. Oh, Aircrack NG is not found. Oh, it's also case sensitive. So there you go. We all learned something new there. So it's case sensitive. Once you type in that command right there, and in this case, we're actually be going after our cracking.pcap over here. So this actually is a file that Wireshark can open, but unlike our previous one, it's actually a encrypted one. So Aircrack's entire purpose is to crack encrypted ones. So give it a second, and we're going to run through this a little bit. Let's go. And there we go. We decrypted it and we found the key, which in this case happens to be 3D underscore MG. So Aircrack is really good at breaking lower encryption standards. Like if you have a network that's of a higher encryption level or a more modern encryption standard, Aircrack might have a little bit more trouble with it. But a lot of older routers, you can probably break pretty easily and figure out the key to actually get into those routers and then go from there. So that, you know, for pen testers, you could say this is a really useful tool, especially if a corporation has a lot of different networks and a lot of them are probably not up to date, to be quite frank. So for especially for physical penetration testing, you could probably get a lot of information from this. And then the next one we're actually going to test is we're going to go ahead and do John the Ripper. So John the Ripper is actually a password cracker. So I'm sure whenever you hear hacking, you hear, oh, I cracked the password. What's kind of funny about that is technically, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it would be really hard to actually crack a password, especially one that's hashed and let's say salted, for example, which means the hash is a little bit mixed up. So it's, I'm going to say it's pretty much, with our current tech, it's almost impossible to do that on a normal computer. However, there have been a lot of data breaches in recent years. And what ends up happening is a lot of these companies will store their passwords as hashes. Now, hashes inherently are pretty secure. Hashes are pretty good. And hashes, but the problem with hashes is at a certain point, when a hash is cracked, it means that the hash is fully cracked. And especially if it's not salted, once again, you're going to very quickly find that a lot of these passwords that were hashed are now unhashed. So the example we're going to show is actually John the Ripper. Now, John the Ripper, what it does is it will actually take code, or not code, it'll take hashes of passwords, and then it'll take a list of known broken hashes. And what it'll do is it'll literally just check every hash. It'll brute force it until it finds the correct password. Or if the password's not in those hashes yet, that list of known broken hashes, then it will just tell you, okay, I can find this. So it's probably a hash that has not been cracked yet, especially longer passwords. That's why longer passwords tend to be your friend. Regardless if they have number, letters, and all that, longer passwords help a lot. There are other issues with that, especially look at like MD5, for example, you run into collision issues, but for our sake, broken hashes are bad. So the command here, we got John, we've got, and we're basically saying, okay, we want you to follow the format of raw MD5. As we said, MD5, there are a lot of cracked versions of MD5 out there. So we're basically telling, okay, look for MD5. And then we have our word list here, which is actually from the data breach of RockU. If you don't know RockU, it was a data breach, I believe back in 2009, where a massive dump of hash passwords leaked along, and then a lot of them were cracked into plain text, which means we have a lot of broken hash passwords now. So what we're basically telling John here to do, John the Ripper, is take our file on the desktop, which in this case is actually going to be our hashes.txt. And we want you to compare it to the RockU data breach list of passwords. And we're going to just run it. Oop. Non-specified. Oops.
Oh yeah, you didn't specify that hash file.
So in this case, and once again, because it's not Windows, our file paths are going to be a little different. See, there we go. So and actually I'll specify how we call to these. So for our word list, now Kali Linux actually does have the RockU data breach built in and has the dictionary of passwords and hashes that were broken. So where you have to go is you go into user, share, word list, RockU.txt, and then from there all you have to do is specify the place that your hash passwords are. In this case, it's on our desktop again. So you have to go through home, Kali, desktop, hashes.txt. So, and then once we run this, I do see there's some extra stuff at the end there. Once we run this, no such file or directory. It will break because that's just how these workshops always go. Oh, it does. Oh, you know what? It's because we're missing our, and you also have to start with a backslash. That's totally my bad. So there's always little things. If you do forget them, they will not run. They'll just simply break. And now that we actually have it right, it will still not work because it just hates me.
Yeah, I think. No, so what happens is once you've cracked passwords, it stores them in a file somewhere, and then if you try to run it again, it'll say, "Well, I already cracked these for you. Go look at them."
I actually had no idea. That's actually kind of neat. Actually, I'm curious if that's what this is. It's kind of funny, but so
I'm not sure where that file is stored though.
I'm not entirely sure. I'm going to try to recopy this and do it this way, but I don't think that's going to work. So basically, to kind of explain what happened, because I've actually run this workshop before as a test to make sure it worked, Kali Linux, I'll just rename it. Okay. Rename the hash file. All right, we'll try that. So what happened is it actually, John the Ripper is kind of smart, and it said, okay, I've already cracked these. I don't really need to re-crack them again. Let's just call this hash. We'll just rename it to that. Let's give that a shot. See if that fixes it. Nope. Okay. Yeah, it still does. Okay, that's totally fine. So basically what this would have done is it actually runs through all the different hashes that it has stored from the Rocky Breach, which in this case is thousands. And it'll basically try each of those against our hash file, which I'll actually show you what the hash file looks like. That's actually all different hashes right there. So, and it literally just checks all these hashed files and these hashes and sees which ones are already exposed in plain text on the Rocky Breach. So, yeah. So basically, that's what John the Ripper does. And you've got that tool. You can try it against pretty much any hash as long as it exists. John can try it at least. Again, though, they have to be exposed in plain text first. If they're not exposed, it'd be, I'm not going to say, again, not going to say impossible, but it would be really difficult to figure out a non-plain text password. So
if you really want to demonstrate, maybe try pasting that hash.
Okay.
That I put in the chat.
Yeah, we'll just completely erase that guy. And we'll see if we can get it to do the cool looking thing. Ah, okay. Oop. And we're going to open something too while we're at it. Hello. Using the default encoding. Loading one password. Okay, there you can see it's actually beginning to load hashes to try it against.
Yep, it got it. It's right there.
There we go. And there, I think this is actually the full password right here.
No, that's not it. It's password 123 just above it.
Oh, gotcha.
The line.
There we go.
Right there. Password 123. Yep.
So there actually was John the Ripper breaking a hash password by using the RockU breached data file. So it was basically testing all these different files. Oh, cool. And then we can actually test all of our other ones too. So okay. We can give that a shot, actually. I don't know where John would be stored, though. Okay, either way, so that was testing the password. Echo John. Oh. So that was sort of testing the password breach. Let's go ahead. Let's move on to Metasploit. So.
Actually, does anyone have any questions before I move on?
And we have some people following along here. So sorry if I've been going a little bit fast.
Anybody? You can unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Metafuck.
Okay, I guess we can move forward then.
Okay. And then we will go ahead and move into Metasploit, which if you don't know what Metasploit is basically, it's sort of like the Kali Linux of tools where it just has a bunch of different tools in it. I'm actually going to try to expand this guy before it does its thing. Skipping initialization. If you're setting up for the first time, your message is going to be a little bit different, where it's actually going to say that it hasn't set up before. Again, I've already run a lot of these to make sure they're actually working. Apparently to the detriment of me, but that's okay. And we're going to go ahead and start Metasploit up. So Metasploit has a ton of different tools in it. The specific tool we're going to be working with is actually called Nmap. And Nmap's whole point is to be able to find open ports on a web server. Oh, there we go, Metasploit. And Metasploit likes to do these cool little like, I don't know what you call them. They had a heart in the other one. I actually don't know what this is, to be entirely honest. But still kind of neat. Now we're going to run Nmap. And the way we're going to do this is we are going to run, I'm actually going to type this one out. We're going to run db, a bull's head. I think it is a bull's head, actually. I've never really, that doesn't really look like a bull's head to me, but, or cow's head. So we're going to run this command. We're going to do db underscore nmap dash v dash s under lowercase s and uppercase v. That's very important. 45.33.32.156. Now, if you're worried about this being illegal or something, this is actually the website that Nmap lets you test against to actually test their product to see if it's working. So we're going to run this real quick. You can see it's going to do a bunch of things. It's going to start scanning ports. It's going to start looking for open ports. And then you can actually see we've already found some even before the scan is fully finished. You can actually see right here, we've got a couple of TCP ones, 80, which is the normal one for web server. We've got TCP 22, TCP 5060, 3133. We can keep going down the list here. Down here, you can see that again here. So you actually see specific ones. For example, this is actually for SSH. So theoretically, if this was a vulnerable server, you could theoretically SSH right into here, and that's now your open vulnerability that you've exploited. Now, Nmap can't do that, but there are tools in Metasploit that can do that. We're not demonstrating any of those because we don't actually have a network to test against, maybe fortunately, but you can actually see, and actually it will give you some versions. So you can actually see over here, we've got OpenSSH under Ubuntu. Down here, we've got Apache, we've got MP and Echo down here. So this is what Nmap can do, and this is all under Metasploit. And Metasploit has a lot of different tools to now exploit, theoretically exploit these. So it kind of runs everything on its own without needing other tools. So instead of having to do Nmap on its own and then go like, I'm trying to think of a network attack tool that you could use. Ishan, can you think of any off the top of your head, actually?
Not at the moment. Wait, Chris, can you? Network attacking tools.
Oh, here you go. Actually, here's the collection.
Oh, wow.
Tool. Yeah. So tools that could be used to exploit like an open port, for example. Actually, maybe Netcat could do that. I'm thinking about that.
Aircrack is listed under it.
Depends on what it is. Yeah, so Metasploit has a lot of those tools built in them, and they would just automatically exploit that port as soon as it sees it. So, but you would just use Nmap to find those open ports that could be exploited. So, does anyone have any questions about specifically Nmap or Metasploit? We can try to answer it. Metasploit's a huge tool, though. It's like the Kali Linux of tools again. So, we'll show you sort of the small list that we've compiled. Actually, I suppose we can even bring up the big list, to be honest. Auxiliary is available. So that's some of our demo of tools. We're only going to do 4 here, but I'm actually, what I'm going to do is, and this actually, I didn't have this plan, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to share a list of literally every tool that Kali Linux has. Like, check this out. This is really cool. This is sort of just a massive list of tools that Kali has built into it. Like you got a mix of forensics, you've got web application tools. Like these are built to actually tear apart web applications and find vulnerabilities, because a lot of times the easiest way to get into an organization is just through their web application. One thing wasn't patched, or they might have let's say Flash running on it, for example, and that's an entire vector that you could just utilize. You got stress testing, you got sniffing and spoofing, you've got password attacks. Again, this is where John the Ripper comes from, maintaining access. So if you wanted to access the system, you could theoretically use one of these, and now you have an open tunnel to this exploited system. So Chris is telling me, let's try this. I can spell. So This is actually a tool right here that you could use to actually exploit open
We
ports you
can't
find.
see what you're
Oh,
showing.
my bad. Let me share, stop sharing, share again. Perfect. So auxiliary is actually something, is a tool in Metasploit that would be used to exploit things that like Nmap finds within Metasploit. So you can actually see right here, these are just all the different versions of tools that you can use under auxiliary. So anyways, back to the PowerPoint slide. Share that. So go ahead and we'll start here. So we ran through a bunch of those demos. I showed you the massive list. I mean, this is a small list we collected. We thought were the most popular setups of tools, especially if you've worked in cybersecurity at all. You've probably seen at least one of these before, if not all of them. So this is just a small list, though. Kali has so much more. And the question actually would be, what doesn't Kali Linux do in the security world? And even outside the security world, we said earlier as a joke, it can't game. Do not use Kali Linux for gaming. Honestly, it's just not worth it. Don't even use it as a regular OS, to be honest. It's not really built for that. It's very scoped. It's very specialized. It's not really built for anything outside of the massive list of tools that it is. But what it can be used for is penetration testing, red teaming, blue teaming, other cybersecurity testing. You have this is one of the best OSs to even consider running with those. And again, don't use it for normals. And especially if you have never really played around with Linux before, I would actually recommend before you even get into Kali Linux. So we taught you how to install it. That same method, though, can actually be used to install other Linux distros. For example, Ubuntu, Mint, distros that are a little more closer to Windows. That might be a better introductory distro to get you to understand Linux, because Linux is not like Windows or macOS for the matter. It's not built to be easily, and not even that, let me put it like this. It's built to be customizable. And that just means that there's a lot you can do with it, but you need to understand how to do those things before anything good can happen. You'll just get really frustrated if you try to jump straight into Kali Linux. So I'll tell you right now. So, but you can definitely use it to demo security tools like we were doing. If you wanted to show a client, for example, or even your friend, you're like, I want to impress my friend with a cybersecurity thing I learned. You could just pull up your Kali Linux distro and run a cybersecurity, or not like an Nmap, for example. You could run Nmap, you could run John the Ripper, you could show them, hey, check this out, I can crack passwords now. Like, it's one of those things. Yeah, you can assert your dominance with Kali. Just show everyone, be like, I'm a Kali Linux user. Again, it is not Windows or macOS, though. Do not use Kali on the daily. In fact, even people that use Kali Linux do not use it daily. They will have it, it'll be in their toolkit, but it is not, it's not Windows. So they still have Windows or macOS for the matter, or maybe even Ubuntu. Who knows? So this right here is just a funny slide I wanted to insert because, as we said, Kali Linux is meant to exploit vulnerabilities. There's an old joke, or maybe they use Arch. True. We did have some people say they actually do use Arch. So this is sort of the old joke, is that if you're in cybersecurity, you're scared of Internet of Things devices, like an internet connected oven. So I thought this was just kind of a really funny joke to throw in here, because Kali Linux is built to exploit things like an internet connected oven that hasn't been updated in like 6 years. Like, just imagine that for a second. You go in with Kali Linux, and it's actually really easy to find at least 1 or 2 tools that are absolutely going to work in almost any environment. Because quite frankly, everything is connected to the internet, and Kali Linux is built to run with that. So I thought it was just kind of funny. And again, if you want to run those tools again and give it a shot, if you're watching the recording, or if I was going a little bit fast and you needed to rewatch it, this slider here has all the commands you actually need to run it. The only one I'm missing here, actually, I realize now, the Metasploit one actually does require you to start Metasploit first, which you can either do from the toolbar or type it in the Metasploit command that'll bring you into the command prompt for Metasploit. And then from there, the rest of this does work, though. You just have to type in the DB part. I just included this if you wanted to go to their test site and see what that looks like. Tab is your friend on all of these. I put this down here, but in reality, Tab is friends with all of these, except Wireshark. Wireshark has a GUI, which is nice, but if for some reason something isn't working, just click tab and I guarantee you it'll find the right prompt. For example, if you're doing /home and then you're like, man, I can't, for some reason it's not going to /desktop, do tab and it'll say, oh, I need /Kali because that's actually the file folder before the desktop. It's just one of those things. Tab everything here because it will save you so much time. We will be releasing these slides after though, so you can also just copy paste all of these. Yeah, tab is a good shortcut on any Linux machine. If you're going to learn Linux, the one button you should memorize pretty quickly is tab. If you're typing something in and it's not working, tab. Even if you're copy pasting something and if something's not working, kind of backspace and like just tab it, see what happens. I guarantee you it's going to help you. It actually helped me a lot when I was figuring out these commands. So tab is your friend, remember that. But all these commands right here should work. Now, when you download it, you are going to be missing these files like hashes.txt and actually even the rocku.txt. It is built into Kali Linux, but you do need to unzip it first. So I will actually send that command in a bit here so that you can do that. I should include that on here too. I'll include it on the slide when we release them, actually. So from there, that is the end of our Kali Linux tour. So hoping that was a good tour for everybody. Here's the links. Again, we're going to be releasing these slides, but just a couple of them. This top one right here is all the tools, that massive list I showed you earlier. We've got basically what is a Virtualbox. So if you wanted to learn a lot more than we gave here, we kind of gave a summary, but there's so much more to it. Should I use Kali Linux? This is actually a really great doc if you want to hear why you don't use Kali Linux as a daily OS. And offensive security, this is actually, so this link right here is actually how we downloaded the image we're using for this workshop. So if you do want to download it from scratch, and then we have scanme.nmap, again, that's the old link. And then this one right here is netcat. Originally, we were going to do a netcat demo. It actually ended up not working because VMs don't like netcat. So, hey, something you learn every day. So with that, are there any questions for us? And we'll try our best to answer them. I'll go ahead and we'll just scroll back to the front page. There we go. How efficient is John the Ripper? So the other one we were actually going to use was Hashcat, actually, because Hashcat will actually use your GPU, which means it'll work even more efficiently. John the Ripper is actually, I would say John the Ripper is still fairly efficient. It just only uses your CPU, which your CPU is efficient. It's just not nearly as efficient as a GPU that just has far more cores to do a lot more cracking with. This may be more of a Chris question. Does it brute force if you don't give a specific list of passwords? Yes. Okay. So yeah, it'll just start brute forcing. Basically, it'll say, okay, I'm just going to take every password I possibly know and just, yeah. And especially, this is the thing with John the Ripper, again, it's CPU based. If you use something like Hashcat, it will work better because it'll be using your GPU, theoretically, if you have a GPU. The only thing is we just couldn't get it working in the virtual machine because unfortunately, Hashcat expects a real GPU, which virtual machine gives a fake virtual one, which is kind of just funny. Yeah, definitely set rules. In fact, let me actually, yes, I believe in the absence of a GPU, it will fall back to CPU, but it's still not nearly as efficient as having a GPU and Hashcat, whereas John the Ripper won't even consider a GPU. I saw a question.
I just realized I should probably stop recording.